Welcome to another edition of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binden. I'm the chairperson of MORE, Movement Omaha for Race Equity. And what we're known for is racial equality issues. We're dealing with anti-racism. We also deal with accountability, transparency. And we're known for doing book discussions, hosting community forums, and more than anything, trying to bring our worlds together to talk about how to push back at some of the craziness that happened in our region. And obviously it affects us nationally. And today we have a special guest with us today, who's a former board member. It's Riley Wilson. He's worked and trained community members. He was an activist, and he's also was a law student and a legal observer since completing his training in legal observing with the National Lawyers Guild. And after his arrest as a legal observer in the 2020 protest, Riley and other plaintiffs successfully sued the city of Omaha, the Omaha police chief, and the Omaha police captain, leading to the changes in the Omaha municipal codes in the police department operating procedures to help better protect protesters. Riley has previous experience working in the ACLU of Nebraska and the Office of the Federal Public Defenders for the District of Nebraska while studying at Creighton University School of Law. And before law school, Riley has worked in some other jobs in our community. He has a law degree, as I said. He's from Creighton University there. And in this interview, we're going to talk more about the over-policing of people of color, people in general, and the lack of police accountability in the Omaha Police Force. And that's some of the challenges that many of us face in dealing with their excessive budgets, their lack of transparency, and the data with the community. And first, I want to start off, Riley. First, tell the participants a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I think you covered a lot of it there. I think policing is something that I've been more and more interested in since maybe the mid 2000s or 2010, sorry, that I've become a little bit more aware of how much we spend on policing and just kind of what the impacts are. And, when you create a police budget, you're really creating a choice about what your priorities are. And it became apparent to me the more I looked into it. I went kind of from the position of, we just need to have better policing and we just need to, maybe have more community policing and things like that. And then the more research you do, you realize that it really doesn't matter if you just have more, community-based policing or you have more black and brown officers on the police force. At the end of the day, policing itself is really the problem that we're looking at because when you are just putting so much money into an office that actually is not producing things for people in a way that materially impacts their life in a positive way. It's just money that kind of goes out the door and is gone. So, over time, that's something that I've been really interested in and I've just been really keeping an eye on it and kind of tracking my own numbers on police spending, particularly in Omaha.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that over the years, you've raised concern about police budget relative to other city services. Why should that be of concern to taxpayers?
Yeah, so as I've been kind of looking at the 2026 budget in particular, this is of course the first budget under Mayor Ewing, and it kind of was a little startling. So for those who don't know, the current police budget in Omaha is $233,169,680 for the year. And that represents a 13% increase from the previous year, which is the largest increase I've seen of the police budget in the available data that we have, which goes back to 2013. So for almost a decade and a half, we have numbers available. This is the largest increase we've seen ever in that time. That's also 38.5% of the general fund, which is the over a third, almost 40%. That's also the largest amount percentage of the general fund that the police budget has ever taken up. Of course, $233 million is the largest amount the police budget's ever been. And I think the really eye-opening thing for me was that this is telling me that if Mayor Ewing keeps the police budget on course as he has it right now, in his first term, he will have spent over $1 billion on police in Omaha.
Wow.
So we'll have $1 billion that will have come through the taxpayers, will have gone to the police department, and I can almost guarantee you that 4 years from now, there's not going to be a lot of differences in this city. And so you think about, what would it look like to put hundreds of millions of dollars into a place like North Omaha, right? Rather than having this just be a huge bloated budget where $1 billion is at current pace set to go out the door under Mayor Ewing in his first term.
Well, you know, I also call them the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. You got a former police chief, and then you got other person's retired police chief. They're both retired, but they're as the mayor. And then you got Todd, who's been there for I don't know how long. And obviously, there's some issues with you got the Trinity in charge of our city budget and doing the kind of stuff they do. Because I know they all believe in that thin blue line, the way they operate. But quick question is, how easy was it for you to find this data on the website? Are we pretty transparent and I'm all about sharing the budget and what's going on with this police department from your perspective?
Yeah, to be fair, I don't think it's hard to find the budget. You can get the whole entire city's budget on the website. Like I said, I have a link in my spreadsheet for the numbers that I keep that goes every single year all the way back to 2013. So it is very much available. It's not like you have to, you reach out to the city through certified mail or email somebody to the city and wait for it to get back to you or file a records request or something like that. It's just available online, which is good. That's how it should be. I will say the bigger problem, though, is probably the amount of time that the city grants to the people of Omaha to give their input on the city budget. That's the much bigger concern for
What
me.
are we talking, a week or two, or what are you talking about?
I mean, I would have to go back and look to see exact like dates, how long it is, but really that entire process should be lengthened. It's not very long. I want to say it's a couple weeks where you have like input to where you're making final votes. But I also think that on top of that, they need to make the times for which people can come and speak to the city council more friendly to the average person in Omaha, right? Most people have jobs. Most people cannot just leave their job to go to a city council meeting in the middle of the day. And if we're talking about the budgets, the over $1 billion budget that we're setting for our city, we really should be trying to bring in folks. And if that means the city council members and the mayor need to come out on a Saturday and just be available in the afternoon on a Saturday when most people have that time off, they should do that.
Right.
So I think more input from
The
the people
community
of
on this.
Omaha would be much better. Yeah.
Well, and my criticism is I don't think they've ever had a community forums where they have their handlers or 360 people who've been there step and fetch and somewhat. And I also have challenged them where the chief should come out. I think he did it once, but I'm not sure where he comes out with without the extra baggage from the people who will be saying yes and not in their head, but just have some general funds, at least meetings where they're forums where they're talking 2 or 3 times a year. Now, by the way, the other thing I didn't ask you, and it hit me, I had a hard time getting some of their data on race, particularly juvenile justice or even crap. But was there anything you saw on the budget sheets or anything that you were aware of that deals with racial or geographic kind of data like that? Is that out there?
That might be out there. I don't believe it would be in the document I was looking at. It's pretty tightly about fiscal stuff. I mean, it's
Okay.
talking about where the revenue comes from, how it's being spent, how much of it is from the general fund, things like that. And then it goes down department by department, so you can get a pretty good idea into each department on where a lot of that money's going. Whether it's what percentage goes to labor, what percentage goes to supply,
But
whatever.
no racial data, in other words.
Well, I don't want to say no, none, but I'm saying that probably for what you're talking about, that's not the document you'd want. If there
Okay.
is data kept on that, my guess is it's going to be kept somewhere else, but it is possible that that type of data isn't kept
Yeah,
by the
and
city. I just
and
don't
I had
know.
a hard time when I was working with him. But let me switch up. I want to ask you, if we could just double talk. All the time I hear Willie Barney and his clan or troop, and you hear the chief back in the day, and even now, you said we got one of the best police forces in the country. We got low crime rate because of good policing. Obviously, there's some things you can't police that happens internally, somebody's house and so on. We also heard the chief say that again, they're below capacity. I don't understand why you need extra officers. I know they got the best benefits in the country or in the world when you retire after 20 years. And also, I know their spouses or loved one, if something happened, they continue their salary for the rest of their lives or their insurance policy. But I also, the chief, the other thing is in the previous program, you mentioned that the budgets for law enforcement based on population size and crime rates was a concern at that point. Is there a national standards from your research? Or is there some other data you may have that talks about what should that police budget look like in light of what you shared earlier, Riley?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a standard necessarily, but I think what I've seen is there are some numbers I think from the Urban Institute from 2021, I think is the most recent numbers I have. So it's a little out of date now. But with those numbers, I think they were saying that the percentage of funding for police from a city, and I think this is average, and I also don't even know what they consider to be a city. Is that, anything over the size of 200,000 or what? I'm not sure. But was about 13% of the budget on police spending.
And where are
Um,
we at here now in Omaha? What is the number you just said?
we're actually right around that number. So I would say
Okay,
we
so
are
it's okay.
about
We're
on
in the
par. Yep.
balance.
Yep. So I don't know that we are that much different than now. Here's the thing. When it just says city, again, that's what I don't know. Um, you have one thing you have to consider also is like you have New York City, for instance, right, with a multi-billion-dollar police budget, and their percentage is very high that they spend on police, right? So
Right.
if you have something like that, like the city of New York, and it is really increasing that average amount, I don't know, if really that number of 13%, maybe for the other cities of the size of Omaha, that number is maybe closer to say 10% or 11%. Maybe Omaha is a couple of percentages higher. I'm not sure. And so that's part of the problem is that when you are just like lumping all this data together to say like, oh, cities spend this much. Well, the city of Omaha and the city of New York are very different, right? And New York spends a lot per capita on policing. So does Los Angeles, for instance. Chicago spends a lot, although maybe not as much, maybe not quite as bad with their new mayor Johnson, who's much better in Chicago. But yeah, so it's hard to say. Sometimes you're comparing apples to oranges a little bit, and you also it's tough when you have if you're just looking at all of Nebraska because if you can say, oh well, this is the percentage per capita or this is the spending per capita in Omaha versus I don't know, Valentine, Nebraska. I mean, they just different cities, different populations, different needs. So yeah, it is really tough. I do think at the end of the day, policing needs get made on a very local level in every community. And I think generally what happens is that once you start to commit money to a police department, to claw it back is nearly impossible.
Well, I know that because I got three helicopters floating out there. I know they didn't flying all three at the same time, but again, those are very expensive. And then the other issue is that back in the day, those of us who are old school remember Dr. Sam Walker, who works in the criminal justice department. He was a thorn in their buttocks all the time about all the malfeasance that they did in the community. I know they didn't like him, as well as I know some people in his own department didn't like him, but he wrote a book, and he had a number of articles to talk about we need to have more greater oversight of the police department. But I want to switch up just a little bit, and I know in recent months, nationally as well as locally, we've seen the over militarization of the ICE, Gestapo tactics amongst arresting innocent individuals in our communities and nationwide, particularly in Minnesota. Are there any recourse to stop some of this outrageous behavior and tactics in our community, and particularly in Nebraska, from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing there is that when federal agents come into a state, they have the supremacy clause that's really going to protect them in a
Wait,
lot
wait,
of ways.
explain what you mean by that, because most of us know what a supreme clause mean. What does that mean?
Yeah, so basically, if the federal government is sending in agents to do work on behalf of the federal government, of course, has uh, their law is going to oversee supersede the state law, right? So what they're saying is, as long as they're doing their job, there's not really anything that the state can do to stop them because it's federal law.
Oh,
So
that's how they
really,
get away with it in Minnesota then. Okay, gotcha.
so what it comes down to really is there's a Supreme Court case, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but that basically has shielded federal agents doing their work so long as it's reasonable. What they're doing is reasonable, and so I think where you have to be able to make a really narrow legal argument would be that the officer did something outside of the capacity of his job and it was unreasonable in the way that he did it. Now, I think there's probably a lot of these cases that are going to be made up in Minnesota here in the future, with the recent deaths of like Alex Preddy, for instance. So, but there are definitely cases where it's hard enough in states for people to bring lawsuits against local police. When you add on the added layer of it being a federal officer, you've now brought this into an entirely there's a new scope you have to view it through, and that officer alone can remove it to federal court, and so now it's no longer in the hands of a state court, and so there's
So
just a
in other words, they hijack the situation and make it more worse, like some of the other federal agendas, and we just ain't got no choice in the matter. Is what you're alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot of the federal government has a lot of power, and when they start sending in federal, agents or officers into a state to do work, and they are acting outside of the law or on the edges of the law, it's not easy
To
to
push
to
back on
prosecute
them.
those. Yeah, I mean, it's possible you can do it. There is a pathway for it, but it's certainly not easy.
By the way, I was around when we had the public safety auditors who kept check and balance on some of the local police department, fire department. That's what they call her, public safety, because she was doing all of it. I know under Tommy Warren's watch, and then they got rid of her, which I was surprised. And again, we had a Ben Gray on the city council, and they didn't bring it back because I think they came under the hypnosis of the police department, the union, and all the internal fighting they have with themselves on who's in charge, the union or the police department, because you hear that all the time. But in our community, some of us are concerned, Riley, with the FBI, U.S. Marshals. I've only seen a few U.S. Marshals in my life. I think there might have been one who came to the 360 meeting, but they're FBI. They're not always out there. And I know they have impact on our community. You just got alluding to that. Are there any oversights that you know of to law enforcement in the state or in the federal government when you got malfeasance to the FBI or them? Because I haven't heard anybody, I don't know really anybody from the department except met the head honcho, but is there anything that you can have oversight if the FBI or federal marshal is acting wrong or something in our community that you're aware of?
Yeah, that's again, the state's not going to have a lot of power to do a number of things. I will say there are some things that I think as we're thinking about how do we try to push back against like federal agents coming in and kind of doing,
Ramrod and being Gestapos, like
yeah, doing whatever they want.
shooting people in the face and all that craziness.
I think the best place that you start at is you're asking your local officials to do what they can to not cooperate and just do whatever it is that's asked of them and actually make it easier for them to do their job. So I'll give you like an example. If here in Omaha, if they want to run an ICE raid and ICE comes in and they say we want to come down and there's a neighborhood in South Omaha that we want to raid and we're really interested in coming down this street. We're going to check out these three houses on the street. We want the Omaha Police Department to cooperate with us by they're not going to do anything in the operation. They're just going to shut down the streets and they're going to run traffic control and they're going to do that and let us so we can be left alone so there's not other people in the community coming in and seeing what we're doing and they can leave us alone. Um, when stuff like that happens, it allows like a police department to say, we didn't have anything to do with that operation. We didn't do it. That was all ICE. Well, yeah, but they asked you for your help, and then you showed up with officers and you helped them do their job by providing them security and keeping people away so they can't see what's happening and how those people are being treated. So you are cooperating with them. And I think what we need to do is to be able to say, like, no, if ICE wants to go after these three people, make we need to be asking we need to make sure that we are spreading their resources as thinly as possible. If it's going to take them an additional four officers to run traffic control, make them send four more officers because that's four more officers we took off the street
Wait,
to
Ryan,
somewhere
hold
else.
it. You actually said that the local police department, if they had the wherewithal, and I want to say as they say, the skill set, they can refuse to do what you just described.
When a federal agency comes in and they want to run an operation, they have the ability to do that. But if they are basically trying to reserve their own resources, their own labor pool of officers, and say, well, it would be nice if we had two officers at the end of the street shutting the street down and two officers at the other end of the street shutting the street down so we can be left alone and we don't have neighbors and stuff coming in here and trying to watch us and see what we're doing and yell at us for, coming and snatching people out of their homes. Wow, it would be nice if we had four more officers to do that. Maybe OPD will just provide it for us. If OPD just does it willingly, because that's a good old boy network of law enforcement, then they are using our taxpayer dollars to help an ICE operation, right? Even though
Well,
they're
so
not.
in other words, what I'm saying is this chief of police, I don't know if he's ever done it. He can say, we don't want to cooperate with you, and there's nothing he can do about it.
That is what they can do. And I will say this: the chief has come out and said we do not do law or immigration enforcement here. That is not what OPD does.
So,
We
so
will
don't
not be
bother
part
us.
of that.
Get yourself out of our community. We don't need you. I know that
Yeah,
he said that publicly on more than one occasion. I'll give him credit for one thing on that one.
yeah, and I will because he easily could have not done that and just cooperate and just like gone out of his way to say we're going to help you with your operations. We're going to bring our SWAT team in to help you with stuff like that, and that would have been worse for sure. But I want to be clear. What we've also seen is like Douglas County Sheriff's Office where they are doing traffic enforcement and stuff for them as they're doing their operations, and then they get to pull their hands back and say, "All we did was traffic enforcement. We were just doing traffic enforcement. We were doing it for a nice operation." So either you're helping federal agents come in and snatch people out of their homes, arrest people that are part of our communities. A lot of them don't have any criminal record. Either you're helping them or you're not. And so I think really we don't have a lot of oversight as a state that we can do, but I think what we can do is put pressure on those who have power locally to not cooperate with them. Or, like we saw Mayor Johnson in Chicago, he has basically come out and signed an executive order in Chicago to say, no federal agents can use public property, as a landing spot for you to be planning and things like that. Because that belongs to the people essentially. So
Well, I like that. I
yeah,
like
there
how you
are
see that
things
happen.
there are things that the mayor can do. There are things, and the mayor has a lot of, he's the bully pulpit to go to the police chief, and say, we're not going to do this here. We're not going to do this here.
But Roddy, that ain't gonna happen. You got the three of the Trinities. They all got pensions coming in from the city and our incomes. That's gonna happen. I just wish I could go back to something you just said. The sheriff has been doing this facilitation stuff. I've seen him on Facebook so many times that they must got an over budget on their PR and stuff. And somebody's gonna ask you a question about that later. But I think the Douglas County Commission should cut his budget when he's out there doing all these dog shows and silly things and coming and shooting people in our community and stuff. But at the end of the day, the way you can show the sheriff department control them and stop them from doing their silliness. And also, I know they don't have many people of color on their force. They should just cut their budget to a point, and that'll keep them in their own little square box of stop coming around here trying to harass people. But I don't switch up. We only got so much time before I open it up, Riley. There, when our community, and at one point, you work for the Department of Labor. And I don't switch up here. And you deal with disabled and unhoused and system impacted veterans. We hear a lot of information about how we need to treat veterans and so on. When you were in that position, what came out of that for you? In other words, what did you learn about the veterans population? Because I hear a lot of times they're homeless, they get arrested, they have all these other problems, some have mental health issues. But what was it like when you worked there? And I know it was some years ago you were in that kind of position.
Yeah, so I worked with veterans who had significant barriers to employment at the Department of Labor, and this is a position where you have to be a veteran in order to work with the veterans.
Wait,
Um,
hold on. You mean you had to be in the military to work with people? Hold on, help me like that. They can't
yeah,
explain that.
yeah, so all of us that have this position, veteran workforce coordinators, we all ourselves are veterans. So I was in the Air Force as an intelligence analyst, got out, and that was my first job when I got out of the Air Force, was working with vets. And so these vets had a number of different things that would qualify them as having significant barriers to employment. It could be that they had a criminal record. It could be that so they were previously incarcerated. It could be that they were homeless. It could be that they had a disability. So a number of different things. Substance use issue, I should say, rather. And so working with them, I think what I found out is, and that's ultimately what led me to want to go to law school, actually, is that my experience, what I found is like you're on a treadmill kind of running and going nowhere, in the sense that, like, every day you have another vet that comes to you, another person that comes to you that needs help.
Mhm.
And what I kind of got from that was that we have to make larger, more macro changes, rather than these, just trying to help people all the time. And we're kind of doing the same thing over and over again. Now we need people to provide services. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that. We should have that. But we also need to have some larger macro changes, I think, around this, in order to make sure that vets are getting what they need. But I worked really hard to. One of the things I tried to do, and I was not able to get done before I got out of that position, was I wanted to make it so that the Department of Labor would work with the Omaha Public Libraries, so that when you sign up for a library card, you would put in when you sign up, whether or not you're a veteran. And by doing that, the Omaha Public Libraries would then be able to track how many veterans they have that have a library card, how many are using the services, how many are in the libraries. That one allows us to maybe help save the library's budget a little bit, because if we can tell people, if you are cutting the library budget, you're also cutting a service that goes to X number of veterans every month. And two, if we know that there are more homeless vets that are in the library, which was the case, I think, back when we had the big Omaha library downtown before our previous mayor gave it away to Mutual of Omaha. We could figure out where those folks are, and then we can go and try to serve them where they are and actually find them on the ground, rather than expecting them to find a way to come to us when they may not have reliable transportation or whatever the case is. So, yeah, so what I got away from that was that we were encountering people with the same issues over and over again, and that really wasn't going to change until we made some larger systemic changes.
While we wait for Ajmal to come back online, I was just curious if you wanted to answer a couple of the questions that were in the chat. Jeannie asked, while you're talking about the police budget, do you know how much OPD spends on public relations? And then she had the same question about DCSO.
Yeah, so for the Omaha Police Department budget, I couldn't tell you like for this year, for instance, what that line item budget is. I know in the past I have received a line item budget, but it was I had to request it. So they don't just post that online for you to see. It can be made available to you, but you do have to kind of, that's, earlier when I said you don't have to jump through hoops to kind of like to go get the city's budget. If you want a line by line budget of OPD, you do have to do a little bit more work. Now, in the city budget, it will give you a very broad budget line items, but very, very broad. If you want to actually know how much is spent on each one of these different things, you really have to go in and you have to ask for it. Now, I've done that in the past, and I would find things that really I just thought this is ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, for instance, I know the last year that I did that, I requested that budget, the line by line budget that they had. They had more money allocated towards their police horses that was actually spent on police horses. So maintaining the horses, whatever. I think the same with dogs. So they're police animals. They spent more money on that than they did for the person who is supposed to be in charge of managing the rape kits that they have. And
Wow.
they just didn't fill that position. The money was there, they just didn't fill it, so they didn't have it. So no money was spent on the person that was supposed to be managing rape kits, but they spent a bunch of money on police horses, which don't actually help anyone. They just let some guy in the police department who likes horses ride around on a horse. I mean, what are we doing here? So I have a hard time hearing, we need the police for safety for this and this and this. And it's like, well, I don't know. I would imagine that the people who were victims of sexual assault and had a rape kit used on them so that they could then test it later. If we don't have someone managing that and we're not working on that, how is that a lower priority than making sure that we have hay and police horses? This doesn't make any sense to me. So there's things like this that I think if the public knew about it and they'd say, where are our priorities here? Where do they lie? Because what are we spending our money on? I think they would be upset, but they don't know. And ultimately, I think when you talk about the budget, a lot of it comes down to people don't know how much we spend on the police, period. I know when I talk to folks in other cities, I had someone I was talking to who lived in Chicago, and he was very pro-police. And I asked him, I said, do you know how much you spend on police here in Chicago? And he's like, oh, I'm not sure. And I was like, well, I'll just tell you, it's about $200 million in Omaha. So what do you think it is here in Chicago? He's like, I don't know, $500,000. And it's over $1 billion. And he didn't even know that. And that's the thing is, I think most people don't know that they spend such an exorbitant amount of money on policing. So I think half the battle is letting people know how much do we spend, and then also what does that look like in comparison to other things in the city. Part of the numbers that I keep about our budget, and it looks like we have Ajmal back, so that's good.
Right.
Is when I combine the budgets of a number of different offices from the general fund, and those offices are the mayor's office, the city council office, the law office, human resources office, human rights and relations office, the parks department, convention and tourism office, the public works department, and the library department. So if you take all of their budgets combined from the general fund, take all of those budgets combined, they equal $108,479,787. That is 46.5% of what Omaha's police budget is. So all of those budgets from all of those offices combined out of the general fund make up less than half of what we spend on the police budget from the general fund. And so I think when the more people learn, like, oh, we have money to spend on other things, we just choose not to. We choose to spend them, we choose to spend almost $250 million on police as we are this year.
Hey, Riley, I'm thinking, Karen, thanks for jumping in and backup. We always have a backup to the backup, and make it happen so we can take smooth like we're on the national level. We switch different cameras. Anyway, I touched my situation here or something, something went out. Quick question. We're getting close. We're going to ask people to speak. And Jenny, I know you have a question, and I want you, if you could speak directly to Riley on that. But one of the last questions I want to ask you, Riley, before we switch over is, I know that you were concerned, and you've been doing this when you were on the board and elsewhere, about the lack of diversity in law school leadership positions. You're conscious of that. when you work in these various positions that you've been in our community and elsewhere, did you see African Americans in leadership positions beside the military? I know the military has done a pretty decent job of having diversity, but in these other positions you've been in, do they deal with racial diversity? And I'm saying African Americans, but I'm also talking about other groups of color yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, my experience in the legal field is very, very limited, just from my time in law school, really. And so I personally did not see that, although that's not surprising just because there's such a low, we have such a low number of black and brown people who become lawyers, right? And
Okay.
I think that's for a number of reasons. I think the to get into law schools are very difficult. It's expensive to do the prep for it because there's all these standardized testing that they have in order to even get in, which I think there has been a growing movement of people who have been trying to really reduce the types of standardized tests that it takes to get into law school. I think as we're finding that they're not always the best indicators of whether or not somebody will be able to get through law school or not.
Mhm.
So that's been growing, although it's not there yet because there have been some schools that they eliminate this testing, for admissions, and then they are seen as kind of less than or whatever because they don't even have this test to get in, but it hasn't really impacted their ability to get people to pass the bar and whatnot. And then the bar is its own thing. The whole reason the bar was created was to keep black and brown folks out of the profession to be able to practice law. So we really should be getting rid of that as well. I think there's a lot of better ways that we could make sure that lawyers are trained and competent and able to provide good legal services to people other than a test that does a lot of memorization. Although they've also changed that recently too, the next gen bar as they call it.
Yeah.
I say all that to say that all of these things I think contribute to having less black and brown people in the law profession. And yeah, I think it's a problem because these are the people that oftentimes go and they are making the law either as a politician, as a legislator, or they're making it through case law, in the courtroom. So I think definitely having more non-white people in courtrooms is better. There's no question about it.
We're going to work on that as more. I know there's some issues about people who are sentenced to longer terms with people of color. We know the jury selection is messed up and corrupt. Again, you got many cases where you have this city of Omaha to be 35 to 47 people of color, but you have these all white enclaves and so on. We're on our time here where we switch over to the audience. And Jeannie, I want to give you a chance to raise a question you had because there's something about rape and some other stuff. But can you open up your mic and say something directly to Riley? I see you got some written stuff here in the chat box. Are you okay with that, Jeannie?
Yeah, of course I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Let's see if I'm okay with putting my video on. Let's
Oh,
see.
do like me. Okay, where your bodies go out. But you can start the question also. Go ahead.
Well, when you had to step away, Karen went ahead and read my question, the first question about the public relations. And
Mhm.
so Riley had a chance to answer that. But the way that they spend their money just raises all kinds of questions. You were talking about about a position open for someone who would manage rape kits, and you said that was an open position and they didn't even bother to fill it. So the question is then, how do you have any idea, or does anyone have an idea about how many rape kits have been left untested?
I want I am being so generous here. I want to believe someone at the Omaha Police Department knows that. I could not tell you if that's the case or not. I don't know if that position has since been filled. I just know that at that time there was a line item, so there was money appropriated to fill the position. So I guess you got to give them credit for saying that there's money for it, but they did not fill the position. And so I just kind of think if we have money to be spending on police horses so these guys can play cowboy, I really think, why are we not spending more time and effort? If you need to go and try to recruit folks from outside of Omaha, outside of Nebraska to fill this position that there's qualified and competent, I want that. I would rather my tax dollars be spent towards that so people can, get some of the answers that they need who are victims here. But I just have a hard time thinking like that this is just not serious to put more resources towards police animals than it is, towards someone who's managing rape kits.
Um,
Other
Another
questions on the
question,
feedback?
I'm sorry,
I was
Jamal.
just saying other questions on the feedback. Can ask y'all.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I do want to it looks like Cynthia had a question here. And I
Okay.
just want to make sure I don't miss it. Cynthia, if you want to come off mic.
Am I there?
Yeah, we got you. You're here.
When I was listening to you speak about the police and their role, the local police, and if they're asked to patrol traffic or something, um, and if the ICE doesn't want to use their resources, that's kind of how I understood what you said. Well, my question is, if the McCook system can be paid for by that ICE to Nebraska, why wouldn't security from our local police be paid for? Even though I personally would prefer ICE took care of their own. But I mean, it's like another way to get income.
Sure. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, I suppose there are plenty of police officers who in their off-duty time, do security type work or whatever. I just think for them, it's just easier for them to just, they call up their buddies at, local OPD and say, hey, can you, send two guys or two cruisers at the end of the streets and, provide some traffic, rerouting or whatever for us and make sure that we don't have people driving down the street as we're trying to do these operations or whatever. Whatever that looks like, that was just an example that I gave earlier, but I don't think they have to. They don't have to pay them because they can just ask them to do it and they'll just provide it. So I think that's why it's really important that we as a community are making sure that we're putting public pressure on our local law enforcement to say like you have some ability to not work with them if they are dead set on doing this and the federal government wants to come in here and they want to do this. And we can't stop them from being present in Omaha. That's one thing. It's another thing to, when they make requests for us to do certain things to say, yeah, we're just going to stop what we're doing otherwise, and we're going to help you do it.
So
Yeah.
if they're volunteering, would they use the cruiser? Would they wear their uniform?
Oh no, they were volunteer. I guess I was just talking about how there are people who outside of their police job can like show up in uniform, I think, and be paid off the clock. So I'm saying I suppose they could pay some off-duty officers to be there at the end of the street or something. I don't think they'd be able to use cruisers in that instance. Yeah, but if they want cruisers to be, parked perpendicular with the street, to kind of block it off or whatever, for instance, that would almost assuredly have to be on the clock and an on-duty officer.
Karen has a question. Karen, did you want to ask that directly to Riley? I see you wrote something in the chat. Or was it Norma?
Yeah. It was just a follow-up to the work that you did with homeless vets years ago in Omaha, and because I think I just read in the news today about how Trump is going to have leveraged the Justice Department to round up homeless vets and get them, placed into guardianship with the government as the guardian, which is something I've never heard of before. But I'm just curious, you might have an opinion about that policy in general, but I'm particularly curious how it'll affect vets in Omaha.
Yeah, I'll be honest, this is the first I'm hearing of this. As we know, we kind of get, news like through a fire hose, especially from this administration. And they also oftentimes will say a thing and then it doesn't actually come to fruition. So since I don't know enough about this program, but my sincere hope is that if these people are the ones administering it, that it does not happen. I will say, what scares me a little bit is I can easily see a scenario where, sorry about that. I can easily see a scenario where vets, they use this program to say, oh, we're helping vets. And then if they can use it to justify getting homeless people off the street and put into some weird detainment of some sort where they're saying like, oh, we're trying to help. I don't know. Then all of a sudden you open the door to do this to everybody. And then, what does that look like? And that could be very scary. So that's probably my bigger concern there. Again, this is the first time hearing of this program. My gut feeling is not good about it, but I don't know a lot about it.
Yeah. There's a question that came in from Norman and it says, where do you feel about defending the police? Or if you had to make a budget or restructure, how would you look at the Omaha current budget?
Defunding the police. Okay.
Right. Defunding.
So personally, I think what we should be doing is, I think, let me go back to my spreadsheet here. So our budget right now, for this year, we're spending $233 million on police. I think if you were to ask most people, hey, do you think that the Omaha felt pretty safe in 2024, just 2 years ago? I think most of them would say, yep, I don't really remember it being a big issue 2 years ago. I think Omaha is pretty safe. Okay, cool. We spent $193 million that year. So why are we spending $40 more million, especially when we're being told by the police department themselves that that crime is dropping? And they're saying we don't have, Ajmal said this earlier. They're telling us we don't have full capacity for police. We don't have as many officers as we want. But they're also telling us the crime is falling. So it seems like we don't need to spend $40 more million compared to 2 years ago. It seems like that's $40 million that we could actually invest into our communities, into a number of different things, making sure we have good public transportation, making sure we don't have food deserts, making sure we have jobs programs, making sure we have after school programs for kids, making sure that we have affordable housing, or we can put money into more affordable housing, making sure we have access to mental health and healthcare. These are all things that actually help materially help people in our communities that we could be investing in, and we're choosing not to. And I don't think, the way the city looked 2 years ago was that bad as far as safety goes. So I don't know that we need to spend an extra $40 million on it. So that's $40 million down the drain that we could be putting into other parts of our city that we're just choosing not to. And so when I think about, so much talk about defunding the police happens, really what we're talking about is reallocation. I want to just allocate money in a way that makes more sense to help more people. And I don't know that that extra $40 million compared to 2 years ago is actually going to change the life of people who live in areas maybe where there is the most crime, where a $40 million influx of resources to try to work on a number of different things that could help folks probably would make a big difference.
Other thing I remember a few years back, Terry Crawford, who teaches law at the university, criminal justice law, whatever, at the University of Omaha. She mentioned that she was bothered one year where they drove these tanks down 24th to Lake Street, like they were in the military, like they were going to do some. It was a show of force, and they just did it for like showmanship and whatever. But her concern was, why would you drive a tank in the middle of the 24th Street when you're not going to arrest somebody with a tank? But it was almost like they had got some new toys, and from time to time. I remember the Douglas County had to vote there from stopping to buy some material. They had COVID-19 money, and they were buying some extra police unit vans that we're not going to use. But my point back to that is there's sometimes they get these extra trinkets and they go and they do some crazy stuff trying to imitate some of these bigger cities. So that's another concern. But we wish we had more people who could look at that budget. Other questions, other feedback for Riley? Cindy, do you want to read you? Something came through. You want to share that directly?
Okay. In the bio, it said that you worked with and trained community members, activists, and law students. And I was just wondering what's involved with it, what cost, time, the location, by Zoom, out of town, to be a legal observer.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something. So I started doing that in 2020, and that's when we had that huge increase in protests that summer. And so I was involved in a lot of protests as a legal observer. And I think I realized doing that after I got arrested as a legal observer at one of the protests that the Omaha Police Department we don't really have legal observers here in Omaha, and they're not really familiar with what they are. In other larger cities, there are legal observer networks. And so when police see legal observers at protests and rallies and whatnot, they kind of know what they are. They know who they are. They know that these folks generally are not a threat to us. We don't need to go arresting them like they did me, throwing me on the ground and arresting me like I was in the street, even though I was just standing on the sidewalk. But the police here don't know that. They're not the smartest bunch, and so they just see it.
Keystone cops. I heard it called Keystone cops.
I mean, so I think, they knew that. They knew I was a legal observer when they walked up to me and saw me wearing a vest that said legal observer on it, and they don't care. So, that to me said that if we can build up a network of more people who can do legal observing, so they're at more of these protests, so police know when they see a legal observer off to the side recording them or taking notes of what they're doing, they know they're being watched, and they know that there's going to be somebody that's going to have some record of what it is that they're doing, how they're interacting with protesters as they are exercising their First Amendment right. And if they do something illegal and there's a lawsuit that comes from it, there's going to be a third party out there that's got a record of it. And so my hope is that if they see that, they're on their better behavior. Because as a legal observer, I can tell you the best instance I have is when I go to a protest and I don't have any notes. I have no notes because that means the police did nothing wrong, and that's what I want to happen. I don't want them to do something wrong. In the best scenario, I go to every single one of these as a legal observer, and I have no notes to take because the police did not interfere and they let people, go out there and speak their piece because that's what it means to live in a democracy. And so but then we have times where they don't do that. Yeah, I think it's good to have legal observers at these different protests and rallies and whatnot, marches. And I think what I've tried to do is train more of them based on the training I received from the National Lawyers Guild to try to get those skill sets out there.
By the
So
way,
would that include a journalist? Would that, and I noticed, I think you said you have an ID so you can actually point to something on you that says you are a legal observer?
Oh, so I wear like I don't have one around me, but I
Like a vest?
yeah, it's almost like a construction vest or something. It's very fluorescent. When I did it first, I was the first one I knew doing it here. So I literally just put duct tape on there and in big letters, I put legal observer on the front and the back. And I try to make it visible. I've since gotten one that has legal observer like printed on or the ironed onto the back, so it's a little more official looking, the one that I have now. Yeah, in other places they'll use like a fluorescent green hat that says legal observer on it to make it very clear. So you really just want police to know, like, hey, I'm not part of the protest. I'm not with the marchers or whatever. I am here to just watch how they are, protesting or marching or whatever at a rally. And I'm here to observe. And you want to make it very clear to law enforcement and all the others around that so if they see somebody at a protest and they're writing notes or taking video, they don't feel like
so Roddy, if that's the case, why you got arrested then? If you got all this sign and somebody asked the question, what can you do to become a legal observer? But my question is, why were you arrested? And did they handcuff you or treat you different than the other people they arrest?
No, they treated me exactly the same. One of them came up, kind of put his hand on my shoulder, kind of swiped me down to the ground, kind of swiped me down to the ground. And so then I was sitting on the ground because I was told to sit there. There's a video of this actually. Somebody else took a video, and I'm trying to take notes of what's happening to the other protesters at the time because they're getting beat by police. They're getting
Wait, oh, you said they hit people?
Yeah, of course they did. This is all in the lawsuit. Yeah, they're shooting with pepper balls. People had welts all over their bodies from pepper balls that were being shot from pretty close distance. That was part of the lawsuit. You hear all the time people saying, all these protesters are paid. They're out here paid by Soros or whatever, over crazy things that they say. When we negotiated a settlement, the first thing that the city said is we don't want to pay out. We don't want to, because they look like they're guilty if they pay protesters for the wrongdoing. And we actually said, that's fine. We don't want money because we know the narrative would have been spun. Oh, these people just did it to go get paid. So we said, we don't want any money. Take that off the negotiation table right away. What we want more protections for people who go out and protest, right? We want to make sure that people are safe so others don't have to have what happened to us happen to them. And so one of those things was that there would be more restraint for the use of chemical weapons. So an officer can't just individually decide to start using a chemical weapon.
Like ICE does. ICE does that all the time.
They had to run it up. They have to run it up a chain and get command. They need to get approval from a person higher up in the chain of command. So at that point, you'd have someone up the chain who's saying, "I'm making an executive decision here, and if they use that weapon and it comes back and they use it wrong, it's going to come back to me." So I think that more likely to make them think twice about it before they just start firing pepper balls at somebody from 10 feet away or whatever. And so that was really that's really where that came from, I suppose. But the question about how can you explain legal observers, how does one become one? I think the best thing to do is just get trained. You don't need any special license. And also, I want to be very clear, you have no special privileges either. It's not like there's anything special about being a legal observer. It's just that you're also not doing anything wrong as a legal observer. And that's very much something that you try to train somebody, is that you want to make sure that you're following the law. So there's not a reason for the police to be arresting you for any reason. And if they are, then they're really going above and beyond. And usually it's because they, there's someone here that was watching me, the police officer. Who are they to watch me? I'm the police. And then they're upset and they're,
But by the way, the question is, if I want to become one, how do I do it, Riley? Because you talk about the training, but do I call you up on the phone, or is there a place in the phone? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to give anyone legal observer training. You know, and I've done it over Zoom. There's one that I developed myself just in my spare time, and I first developed that for some local activist group that wanted to know more about it. And then there were some community members that kind of were interested in it, so I developed that for them. And then the American Constitution Society, ACS at Creighton Law, they invited me to give that presentation to those law students, so I did that there. And I've since kind of, you know, taken my training, and then I've now applied it at my job, and I try to give that to folks who might be interested in that. You know, as the summertime always brings more protests and rallies and marches and whatnot. So yeah, but I'm happy if anyone reaches out to more, Ajamal can get in touch with me and pass along some information. I'm happy to give a training to anyone who has an interest in it. You know, happy to do that.
Other questions, other feedback? We got about 10 minutes left, y'all.
I do have a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Pozzo, you had something too.
Yeah, question for you. Now that you know and distilled this information regarding the amount that the Omaha Police Department spends, or amount the city spends on the police department, what's the next steps? It seems like the analysis is that there's an over consumption of money going to the police department. So now what do you do?
Yeah, good question. So what I've tried to do is because I have this all in a spreadsheet where you can see the percentages up and down, what it is compared to other departments and all that. I really like looking at the numbers because to me it paints a picture, creates a narrative. I have tried to take this information to people running for office to show them, and I think that way I can say like, hey, if you can get into a position of power where you actually have influence over this, I really would like you to exert some of that, right? I have been successful with some candidates like sitting down and talking to me so I can actually show this to them. And I think for a lot of them who, when they're running for office, you have a lot of different issues that people are coming to you about. And generally, even if they are talking about police, it's not usually about the budget. It's usually about like the things that police are doing, which I think is very much connected to the budget. You know, every time you can lower the amount of interactions that the police have with a community member, that's one less likelihood or one less time. It's less likely that there's going to be a negative interaction there where they're going to harm somebody in our community. So anyway, that's what I've tried to do with it, is just try to put it out there to folks like that. You know, there's definitely, I think, more we can do with this information. I think public knowledge is to me, I think one of the biggest factors in the fact that people do not have enough curiosity or maybe anger over how much we spend, because I don't think they know. I think if you ask any average person, you know, tomorrow, go to a coworker, call up your brother or sister, ask one of your parents or whatever, say, how much do you think we spend on police here in Omaha? And I would almost guarantee you they're going to undersell it. I don't think they're going to know. And if you told them it's almost $250 million, I think they'd be very shocked.
Riley, we're running down. I know Jeannie want to say there's another question in the chat before we close out, but Jeannie, you want to say something, and then we can get to the other question on the chat.
Yeah, I do. It's you talked about police interactions, and I think earlier you may have said something about over policing, but I don't remember what was said. I'm curious about how much money Omaha Police Department spends on things like automated license plate readers, shot spotter, facial recognition technology. And for anybody who has a family member or family members who are on the gang database, all of that is really should be really alarming to see that the police department is spending, I don't know how much, but maybe you do, just on tracking people. They have these mass surveillance systems out there that I don't know how to stop. And if you have any hints on how to back that up, I would love to know. I did hear about a city that got rid of ShotSpotter, and I don't know how they did that. And I don't remember what city it was.
That's exactly right. It was Chicago. Yep, okay. Chicago got rid of ShotSpotter, and they actually saw that it made no difference. So as much as we get sold on ShotSpotter being, and for those who don't know, ShotSpotter is just like, it tracks where it believes gunshots are coming from. That's, you know, and you have to pay this company to have a contract to use it, basically. Chicago is obviously paying much more, larger city, more, they had it utilized in more areas than Omaha does. But I think, just re-upped the contract recently, a couple $100,000, I want to say we spent on it. But Chicago basically said, like, we can better use that money some way else, some other way. And it's a lot of credit to Brandon Johnson. I mean, in my opinion, one of the best mayors in all of America. And I think he's done an incredible job, and I think he has been willing to stand up and just say, "Hey, if the data shows us that we don't need ShotSpotter, I'm not going to continue to be beholden to these companies that want to try to put a ransom up to us, say if you don't give us this money, then it's going to be harmful to your city, and you're letting all the people shoot everybody and everything bad happens." I mean, that's just not the reality. They got rid of it and it didn't make a difference. So yeah, and so to answer your question earlier about about some of the other technologies that they're using within the department, that I don't know exactly. That also might be a thing where if you had that line by line budget of the police department, you might be able to find it in there. Although if it's something where it's a contract where it gets paid all in advance in 1 year over the course of, say, 2 years or 3 years or something, you may not find it in a yearly
budget like that.
budget.
Right,
Yeah.
we're down to the last 5 minutes. So, but I want one other question up here. Then Karen asked, can we get a copy of your spreadsheet you share on our website, the thing you put together where you show this excessive spending and things like that?
Yeah, I could PDF this and share that with you if you just want to post it. I try to keep my my spreadsheet internal so it doesn't get messed with or people don't get into it. But I'm happy to make a PDF of it, so you just have a visual version that somebody can look at and you can share that. Yeah, I think that would be great. I'd be happy to do that. And just the last, I know we have only 4 minutes here, and if I could, just one thing I really want to get across that people know when we talk about policing is that in virtually any city, look at where the safest parts of the city is and where the least safe parts of the city are. Excuse me. And I can promise you, the safest parts of a city do not have the most police. They have the most resources. And so this idea that if we just put more and more and more police in a certain part of a city, so here in Omaha, we often will see it's hard to drive anywhere in North Omaha for more than 5 minutes and not run across a police officer somewhere. The idea that we just keep flooding any area with more police and that's going to fix the problem is really, it doesn't make any sense. The safest parts of any city don't have more police, they have more resources. So what that tells me is if those safe parts of the cities are safe, it's probably because they have access to all the things they need, right? Good paying jobs and affordable housing and things for their kids to do and transportation and mental health and healthcare services. They have all these things, right? So if we want less safe areas of our town to look more like the safer areas of town, we probably need to make sure they have the resources that those safer areas have. And it's not because there's police patrolling West Omaha all the time. It's because West Omaha has all the things that they need to live happy, thriving lives. And we want to make sure that neighborhoods in North and South Omaha have the exact same opportunities that the neighborhoods in West Omaha have.
Good. We're down last minute. I was just make some closing comments. One of the things we really would love to see is much more engagement of our community on some of the issues, because we know that looking at our school system, we have that school to prison pipeline. I know we've done some shows with other folks. We look at the data. There's a disproportionate number of people of color in prison, but also relates to going back to your point of law school. Excuse me, you settle things. If you don't have good lawyers to help you navigate the system, you can have these problems. So one of the things we want to do is get more people to be informed, to be advocates, to be trained, and more than anything, to be able to communicate with a police department that is historically not held community forums out in other places besides the 360 show and tell and the bobblehead events that they give their piece, they walk away. And I tell people the story that when I used to attend the meetings, I would ask a question, and a lot of times there was no response, or we'll get back to you. They never got back. And also share that when you write letters to them, they need to respond. I did write to Deputy Chief Thomas one time. She never got back to me on the data. And then when I finally got a feedback from her, she basically, she was saying something to me, and I says, I don't understand what you mean. She said, you're rude. I'm like, how are you going to say I'm rude? I'm writing you a letter, and then I'm also asking you a question, and you never got back to me with the data. So when you got incompetent, useless people who are disrespectful to somebody like me or anyone who's older than them, why are they on the force? And again, my point is not to go on a rant. Is to say some of the problems we have in our communities, we need better community policing, we need more information, and most of us want police officers to help us out, but we don't want those bad cops to go up and down and shoot people when they're not unarmed. So we would like to, again, I appreciate you, Riley, being on the show, but we want to notch up the community events and not the show and tell they do on every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And again, they're not producing the data to show us, are we improving? Again, I know we have some problems throughout the country, but we don't want that craziness to permeate or come into Omaha in more than what it already is. So thank you for being on the show. And again, we're at our point, and hope we can have you back and have more information on how we can get the police department to talk about how they can have real community policing and show a better job of data. So on that note, we'd like to say thank you all for participating. We hope you join us again. And we always say, may the force be with you, Barocco.